Today, we're turning our attention to Governor Kathy Hochul, who laid out her plans for a stronger, safer, more affordable New York as she unveiled the executive budget for the fiscal year 2027, which runs from September this year to September next year. I'm Jody Kenny. And joining us on this Sunday is President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State, Heather Mulligan. She breaks down the budget for us and explains how it is focusing on investments in safety, infrastructure, and affordability. Plus, President and COO of the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership, Grant Loomis, is also with us to discuss how the budget seems to leave out climate mandates. And later, President and CEO of the Capital Region Chamber of Commerce, Mark Eagan, shares his critiques and what he would change about the state budget. All that and so much more happening right now on In Focus. All right, let's begin today's conversation with Heather Mulligan. She's President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. This is great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Okay, so we know that Governor Hochul released her $260 billion fiscal budget for 2027. It focuses on investments in safety, infrastructure, affordability. I want to know, are you happy with the budget breakdown?
We are, actually. So far, so good. It doesn't contain any new taxes, which is always something I look for right off the bat. We made a series of recommendations, the Business Council, along with the Economic Development Council last year, in a blueprint that we issued. And of the 4 first recommendations that we made, she actually took us up on 3 of them. So wow. I feel very, very good about that. And I mean, I can explain what they are. They're basically taking a hard look at New York's regulations, using AI to identify regulations that are redundant, that we have more regulations than any other state besides California. And many of them have, you know, once the law passed and went into effect, no one has ever looked back at it. So there are things on the books that don't make any sense anymore. Also, she's going to create a governor's office of regulatory reform so that there's a lot more thought going into legislation once it passes. And also she has language in there for seeker reform, which is a little wonky, but basically it's a process it's reforming and speeding up a process that is part of what goes into building anything, but in particular housing. And so we are very happy about these proposals, and we hope the legislature sticks with them.
Well, I know that those are, 3 big things on her agenda and 3 big concerns for many people in the state. So what a win for your organization. From a business perspective, what are your thoughts on no income tax hikes?
Well, very good. You know, in New York, we currently have a high income earners tax already. That's been an extension of an extension of an extension of a temporary tax, because no taxes, well, no one ever wants to say they raise taxes, so they do temporary surcharges that never go away. There is one of those that is in the budget, and it's basically a continuation of the corporate franchise tax, but it wasn't expected that it would be phased out at this point. Just happy that there's no new taxes. We are the most heavily tax burdened state for everyone, individuals and businesses in the country, so we don't need more taxes.
Right, because businesses, are struggling right now. The economy is not good for anybody, especially small businesses, which comprise the most of our businesses here in the state.
So, the catchword that everyone is using in politics these days is affordability, and how you define affordability, kind of depends on where you sit. But if you're a small business, and in the name of affordability, you're told that you need to raise everybody's wages by 30%. Well, that's not affordability for you, right? And it's not affordability for anyone who dines at that restaurant. So the devil is in the details as to how we define affordability, and thought needs to go into the downstream consequences of things that are intended to help people for good reason, but there's always a sort of the next level effect.
The other side.
Yeah.
Hochul describes preparing for uncertainty from Washington. What do you think that entails?
Well, I mean, we're very fortunate. New York is very fortunate that we have a lot of resources. Our budget is more than double, maybe 3 times the size of Florida's, which has essentially the same population. Many states are much more vulnerable, but In terms of the highest categories of spending, in particular healthcare, I think we have a little bit of ability to ride out the storm, but long term, it's going to mean some serious consequences for New York and every other state. We're very we receive a lot of Medicaid funding, and to the extent that that gets tinkered with, there's going to be some hard looking at how do we find other new resources, or take a look at our spending and figure out where we're having a positive impact and where we're not.
In fact, Medicaid is one of two most expensive line items in that budget that she has proposed. The final budget deadline, April 1st.
April Fool's Day, very appropriate.
I was going to say, do you see any major changes or pushback, or you just like you said, April Fool's Day?
Right, you never know. Yeah, a lot can happen between now and then. I think in early March we'll see the legislature's individual budgets, which in many instances are sort of a here's the things we like, here's some things we would like to add in, and then you start, going down the list to see where there are two, the governor and one house, or both houses and not the governor, 2 out of 3, and then you start having conversations about some of those things. But I'm hopeful that we'll have an on-time budget. It's an election year. It's a big motivator. It gets people back to their districts and talking about all the good they accomplished. So I hope it's on time. But I tend to agree with the concept, better a good budget than an on-time budget. So more important that it be thought out.
Right, yeah. I really appreciate you coming in and talking and giving perspective and some thought from the business perspective, but also just, you're a resident of the state, and that matters as well. So it's great to hear your insight. Heather Mulligan, President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And still to come, we continue the conversation on the 2027 state budget and its top priorities for next year. Stay with us in Focus. We'll be right back. And thanks so much for staying with us. We now have Grant Loomis, President and COO of the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, so I'd like to start off by asking you your initial thoughts of Governor Hochul's proposed 2027 fiscal budget.
There's a lot in the proposed budget that, representing the business community, we are supportive of, and we think the governor is headed certainly in the right direction on several key issues. I think concerning is the general sense that the state continues to spend way too much money. The governor's budget proposal totals $260 billion. The legislature will surely add some spending to that, as past practice would indicate. That's $8 billion more than the current state budget. And if you look back at the spending plan from fiscal year 2019-2020, we're up almost $70 billion. And this is, of course, at a time when the state continues to lose population and representation, yet we spend billions and billions more each and every year. And that should be concerning to New Yorkers across all political stripes.
True, and I also stop and think about the fact that the price of everything's going up, and so we're spending more. I wanted to have you talk a little bit about how the budget is growing in size and what that really does mean. Because a lot of people may think, oh gosh, we're spending more money, but they may not equate what that actually means.
Well, when the state is spending more money, that means that the state needs to bring in more revenue. And that's always the big choice that the governor and the legislature have every year as to how we're going to fund all the programs and initiatives that are in the budget. The money needs to come from somewhere, and that comes from a combination of federal aid and certainly tax revenue. Individual taxes, corporate taxes, fees, fines, all the ways that the state brings in revenue. And we have to ask ourselves whether we have a revenue problem or a spending problem in this state. And I think a lot of us think that the state spends way too much money, considering again that we're losing population. It's not as if we're a growing state and that funding would be needed to support our increased population. Sadly, we're losing population. And there's no question that the state budget is significantly larger than several other states that are sort of in the ballpark of the New York State population. population. So there's much more that the state can do about getting serious about spending. Having said that, there are several proposals that the governor is advancing that are very worthy and needed to move New York State forward.
And I know that the proposal has no new climate mandates. Your thoughts on why that is and what should be changed instead?
We are very encouraged that Governor Hochul has not included any additional climate mandates in her proposal. The Buffalo-Niagara Partnership has been talking for some time with the governor and members of the legislature about the need to ensure that energy remains both affordable and reliable in New York State. And we have to be able to balance that necessity with being good stewards of the environment and reducing our carbon footprint and reducing emissions across the board. But we can't achieve what we want to achieve for the environment and crash our economy at the same time. And a lot of the proposals that have been advanced, and some of which passed into law over the last couple years, were really taking us in a very dangerous direction, if in fact we agree that we need to ensure that energy remains both affordable and reliable. And the state has recognized that we are on an unsustainable path, and they have paused many of those programs: Cap and Invest, the All Electric Buildings Act, new mandates as it relates to electric vehicles and trucks, etc. The state has put a pause on those. The partnership would like to see the state fully acknowledge the reality and turn those pauses into indefinite delays, where we're saying, or definite delays, I should say, where we're saying, look, given the reality on the ground, we're not able to achieve whatever that mandate is or whatever that goal is, and we're going to delay it by X number of years. That creates certainty that employers are looking for. By just pausing programs and saying that that pause could be lifted at any point doesn't create the level of certainty that employers are looking for when it comes to investing, continuing to invest in New York. Also very pleased, though, the governor is acknowledging or continuing to acknowledge in her budget that the only way the state will meet its climate goals is if we lean into nuclear energy. And I know that in some parts this is a very controversial topic, but there are reactors operating in New York State right now. There are reactors operating all across this country, helping to fuel this nation's economy. And there is no way that we will be able to meet New York State's energy needs moving forward in a reliable and affordable way while reducing carbon without investing in additional nuclear reactor capacity. And I'm pleased to see the governor continues to make that commitment.
Okay, so I've got about a minute left. What kind of pressure will Governor Hochul be under by lawmakers since the proposal really has no new corporate taxes?
Well, we're very encouraged that the governor is holding the line on corporate taxes. New York State has, as you know, one of the most onerous tax environments of any state in the country, and that certainly includes a high corporate tax rate. So we applaud the governor for holding the line there in her proposal. However, the new mayor in New York City and many factions within the state legislature, especially those hailing from New York City, would advocate to raise the corporate tax rate. We think that's the very worst thing that New York State could do at a time when we need to make sure that business is investing and reinvesting in New York State as we continue to work our way out of the economic malaise from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so keeping the corporate tax rate frozen where it is a strong signal to business that we are in fact open for new investment and new opportunity here in New York.
Grant Loomis, President and COO of the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership. I want to thank you for joining us here on In Focus.
Thank you.
And when we return, we continue the conversation on the governor's budget proposal and priorities, what the president and CEO of the Capital Region Chamber thinks about it. Next, we'll be right back. Welcome back to In Focus as we discuss the governor's proposed executive budget and 2026 priorities. We're joined now by Mark Eagan. He's president and CEO of the Capital Region Chamber. And I want to thank you so much for being here. Could you tell people a little bit about the chamber? What does the chamber do?
Yes, we cover the Capital Region, as our name implies, and we really represent the employer community. But really, our goal is how do we create a vibrant, growing, prosperous capital region. So we want everyone here to have access to opportunity, better opportunity. So what really happens because people have access to a job or to a better job. So really we're really representing all those voices, but we know that if people don't have a job, they're probably not going to have a strong life.
So true. So you guys are really needed for the capital region right now, especially with all the changes that we're going through. Governor Hochul unveiled her vision for 2027. I wanted to get what your initial thoughts were on her budget proposal.
Well, one of the things that we're happy about is she's made it very clear she's not looking to raise taxes. And really one of the main things that we're focused on, our priorities this year, is how do we make New York be more competitive? Is there a way to reduce taxes, first of all on residents, but then also onto businesses? And are there ways to reduce regulation? And her priorities, both in the state of the state as well as in the budget, she has made an effort to say she wants to reduce regulation, and she's made a pledge of no new taxes. So we're happy about that.
And I know, she talked a lot about businesses, and you represent businesses and the people who work for them and or own them. Does her plan make sense, when it comes to businesses, business owners, and the economy?
Well, ultimately, if you look, you can't just look 1 year at a time. Last year she started to bring up affordability, and she talked about how do we make it so more New Yorkers can afford to live here. How do we do more housing? And at first, I think people said, that sounds really good. And then I think there was some concern was, well, is she going to do programs to help folks at a certain income level, but then at other level, maybe not get assistance? So I think it's that all those puzzle pieces. But I think she realizes that the lifeblood of the economy is business, and that there's parts of the state that have continued to shrink. We're fortunate within the capital region that our population is growing, but it's very modest, very modest. So I think we have to govern long term, not year by year. So the devil's going to be in the details.
Right. You mentioned affordable housing. That's my next question. It continues to be top of mind for many New Yorkers, even people who do make a nice living wage. In addition to the $250 million that she wants for more housing, do you think that this is going to help build the economy that people need? Well,
the challenge is that someone says, you need a more sort of affordable housing. If you look at what it costs to build a regular home today, something that's really pretty modest, it's above what most people would actually call affordable. Now, what she has proposed in this year's budget is to actually have the state pay to actually do some modular housing, to look and say, is there ways that they can reduce some of the regulations and what it takes to put those up? And can it be more cost effective and more timely? So I think that's really a pilot she's doing this year, and we'll see if it can make a difference. And I also think that as we were chatting before, how is our housing stock? How can we continue to change it? If you look at other parts of the country, you're going to see where they're building duplexes and triplexes. It reduces cost. And if you look through most of our communities, particularly in upstate New York, it's primarily single-family homes, which drives up the cost of construction and the cost of taxes. So that means, again, local communities have to look at how they do zoning and do regulation to encourage that type of construction.
Also, you and I were discussing this off camera, but really the housing stock when it comes to duplexes and triplexes,
it's almost non-existent.
It's almost non-existent, and it's not good. It's really not good out there. There are not really great properties out there. I know she describes her budget as balanced and fiscally responsible. How will the 2027 budget compare to the 2026 budget? Do you think it's going to be?
Well, the thing is, it's the budget dollar-wise is really close. It's only, I think it's less than $2 billion difference, and I think it's like 1.6 billion more. And that sounds like a lot of money, but when you look at this percentage of the budget, it's it's like 0.7%. And a lot of those costs in there are Medicaid and school funding. So then it's all those other components. And again, as we're looking at our local communities, she's programs that are working, she's really trying to protect. So some economic development programs,
like the Regional Economic Development
Regional
Program,
Economic Council, and they have this, what they call the DRI, Downtown Revitalization Initiative, which means communities can compete and get $10 million to help catalyze investment in their downtowns. And then for smaller communities, it's called New York Forward. So within the capital region, we have 8 counties as part of ours. That means one community will be eligible for 10 million, and 2 different communities will be eligible for 5 million. So for some of our communities, that can make a major difference to make a project go forward.
Right.
So I commend her for keeping elements like that within the budget.
I have 1 minute left. I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you feel that you want to critique in the budget, or an issue that you feel needs attention, that needs to be discussed, maybe we need to start talking about now?
Well, I think the issue about taxes, I think we really have to look, again, the long-term piece. We talk about at certain levels our taxes being like the lowest level they've been since like the 1950s. But if you're looking to do a comparison with our state and other states, we're still much higher, and where those different thresholds are and where the taxes go up. And I think that long term, from a tax perspective and a regulation perspective, if right now, no matter how big your nest egg is, when you retire, when you know that you can go to almost any other state in the country, and you can that dollar will go further, it's tempting to go there. But I think on the positive note, that if you look at all the benchmarks, and there's some lists that we don't do well, taxes and regulation we don't do well, but in so many areas we do extremely well. And so if we can just do minor modifications in those areas, New York can really compete for residents and for businesses.
Well, I really enjoy your optimism, and thank you so much for coming in and kind of breaking down some of the issues that are, important and top of mind to all of us, whether we own a business, whether we own a home, or we're just a resident in the area looking to try to make our lives better. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Always nice to be with you, Jody.
Mark Eagan, he is the president and CEO of the Capital Region Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much.
Thank you.